Welcome to Carting Truth Podcast, a father-daughter duo focusing on sharing revelations through conversations with the Lord. Let's get started with today's episode. Welcome to Carting Truth Podcast. I'm Lindsay here with my dad Shane, and today's episode is going to be an exciting one. We are going to talk about GOG and MAGOG. I've always wondered about this event myself, so I am so excited you're here to dive into this with us.
Mystery of GOG and MAGOG. So the first thing we need to understand is that there are lots of different interpretations about what's going on here. But the problem is, unless you understand the day of the Lord, you will not get the interpretation correct. All right. And so that was one of the very first things that started me years ago when I started Bible study and Bible prophecy. And I really did not have a desire for that until the Lord put it in my heart. And he did that by a argument over when the rapture was going to take place that I had with another guy. It wasn't really an argument. We had a discussion about it. And this fellow had been on a fast for 7 days. And he told me that the Lord had told him during that fast that the rapture was not going to happen the way we thought it was. And so that's what started my journey.
And you argued with him.
I did argue with him.
Because you were a big pre-trib. You're like,
I was taught pre-trib. I
Yes.
was taught, I understand pre-trib. I understand where they're coming from. I was looking forward to it myself
I mean,
one time, very much.
it's very wishful thinking.
People get really angry about this when you start debunking it and taking it apart. And that's not my calling, is to make people mad. I'm trying to make sure somebody is in a spiritual state that when it doesn't happen, that they don't attack the Lord and think that He somehow abandoned them.
Exactly.
And they're not prepared for what's coming.
Right.
But anyway, that's what started my journey. And in the time that the Lord spoke straight to me about this particular subject, He told me that He was going to show me how it worked. And then later on, I was in the book of Isaiah chapter 2, and I ran across the phrase, the day of the Lord. And the Spirit came upon me, as He does, and He said, that's it. You understand that, you'll understand it all. And I said, the day of the Lord, what is that?
Yeah.
Because it's being taught, and I was taught, that
Right.
it is located within the tribulation time. It's not. And that is a big delusion to wisdom and to understanding, is to think that it's part of the tribulation period when it's not. And of course, we've had videos and we've had discussions about this, but I'm going to have to reiterate it again, because if you don't get that right,
Everything doesn't make sense.
you're not going to get GOG and MAGOG right for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's go back and review a little bit of that and talk about what the day of the Lord really is. And then we'll be able to understand GOG and MAGOG. It will make so much more sense, because there are a lot of different opinions about GOG and MAGOG.
Right. Yes.
And a lot of scholars think that it's going to happen prior to Christ's coming.
Which is what I assumed.
That's what a lot of people think, but it's not.
Ooh.
And it actually tells you it's not going to. But we're trying to make it two separate events when it's not.
Okay.
And so if we'll look at the passages about GOG and MAGOG, but let's get the day of the Lord firmly affixed in our minds once again.
Okay.
So the day of the Lord is the millennial reign.
Yes.
And it talks about in Zechariah chapter 14 that the Lord will come back to the earth and He'll reign for one day.
Which is 1,000 years.
And then Peter says, don't be ignorant. This is a command.
Okay.
Don't be ignorant of this one thing, that one day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day.
Yes.
So you can't give a command to not be ignorant of something that's ambiguous.
Right.
And what I'm saying is if it's just a long period of time, it's not actually 1,000 years, then how can you command somebody not to be ignorant of something that doesn't really have a time frame?
That's true.
So the command is in 2 Peter, it's chapter 3, verse 8. It says, be not ignorant of this one thing.
Of this one thing.
And it's a huge command. If we just realize the magnitude of the understanding of what Peter's trying to say. So, how long does Christ reign? He reigns 1,000 years. How long is a day with the Lord? A day with the Lord is 1,000 years.
Yes.
1 plus 1 is 2.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Right.
So he will reign, according to Zechariah, one day,
Right.
which will be 1,000 years long,
Okay.
wherein he's the light of the world.
Right.
Because he said, as long as he's in the world, he is the light of the
Right.
world. He will come as a thief in the night, because Matthew 24:29 says, immediately after the tribulation shall the sun be darkened. The only way he can come as a thief in the night is if the sun's out.
That's right. Yes.
Else you would come and half of it would be a thief in the night and half of it would be a thief in the day. We'd still be in that cycle. So Daniel says that there's an end of days, but the end of days is not the last day. The last day is the 1,000-year day called the day of the Lord, the millennial reign.
Right. Okay.
So when we understand these concepts, then other things start making sense, because Paul says that the resurrection, the Lord descending with a shout, happens on the day of the Lord, because he says in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 16, the Lord will descend with a shout.
Yes.
And then in the next chapter, he starts it out with a conjunction that connects thought. And the thought being connected is, when's this going to happen?
Yes.
And he says, you know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. So he just connected the Lord descending with a shout to the day of the Lord.
Right. Yes. Yes.
So Matthew says, immediately after tribulation, the sun will be darkened. Joel says the sun will be darkened before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes. So that puts the day of the Lord after the tribulation.
Yes, it does.
All right. So when we understand that the day of the Lord is the millennial, that the resurrection takes place in that, and that when the Lord comes, he will destroy all the works on the earth. I mean, all of them. There'll be no New York. There'll be no Atlanta.
What?
There'll be no Rome.
Really?
There'll be no cities of the world. All the works of man upon the earth will be destroyed. All of them.
Ooh.
There'll be no more tanks. There'll
Vehicles?
be no more airplanes. Our main mode of transportation, I don't believe, will be vehicles. We'll start riding horses again.
Just like the garden.
Just like the garden.
Makes sense.
There's not going to be any metropolises. There won't be anybody making these mega businesses. Will they be traveling across the world to keep their business alive?
Uh-huh.
Well, there won't be no Walmart.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say probably more. There's not going to be any of that stuff.
Right.
It's going back. And when you understand that that's going to happen in the day of the Lord, then GOG and MAGOG starts making more sense. What some of the scholars do is they try to say that GOG and MAGOG is spoken in a metaphoric way, and it's not.
Most of the Bible isn't.
Spoken in a literal way.
Right.
And everybody gets all mad. Oh, no, no, no. That's because their understanding is based on what we have today, and they're trying to apply it to the Bible. Well, the Bible knew that we were going to have airplanes, so when it talks about a horse, it's talking about the horsepower in a gasoline motor. No, it's not. It's talking about a horse.
Right.
Else, if he wanted to say horse, we've just stopped him from being able to say that, because we'll make everything metaphors, right?
Just like you say the virgin birth, you could argue that obviously wasn't a metaphor.
Yes.
It really happened.
Yes.
So it's kind of proving that most of the things in the Bible are literal.
He's talking literally. Now, he comes out and says, I seen a great beast rise up out of the sea. He's using that for a metaphor of a nation, right? That nation's literal.
Right.
So if he does use metaphors, it's always for something that's literal. Always.
I like that.
Because if you don't, then when does it become true?
Yeah.
It's not truth. He said, my word's truth.
Right.
If it's some kind of a metaphorical idea, when does it become true?
That's so true.
When Jesus said, I am the light, as long as I'm in the world, I'm the light of the world. When he comes back, guess what? He's the light of the
world. We don't need the
light of the world. Now, when he was here the first time, he was in his flesh, and he was spiritually the light of the world, right? But now it's going to come true physically. When he comes back, guess what? He's the light of the world. Now, when he was here the first time, he was in his flesh, and he was spiritually the light of the world, right? But now it's going to come true physically. When he comes back, guess what? He's the light of the world. So even that will become physical.
Because the physical and the spiritual always meet up.
Always come together. So if you start taking everything and saying it's just metaphors and it's just types and it's poetry and all this stuff and it's never really going to happen, then what makes it true?
That's so true.
All right.
Mm.
So now that we understand there won't be any tanks, there won't be any nuclear bombs, there won't be any airplanes, there won't be any war. He says we'll beat our weapons into plowshares, and we won't learn war anymore.
Yes, yeah.
Then Magog starts taking on a whole new effect, because you got to understand that when Gog and Magog happen, the world is completely different than it is now.
Right. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is Gog and Magog is spoken of in Revelation chapter 20. Whenever Satan is released from his prison, he goes out to deceive the four corners, and then it tells us Gog and Magog. He tells us that for a reason.
Okay.
And the reason we got to look at this, because when you go back into Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, where it talks about Gog and Magog, it's talking about them in a primitive way. When we're here watching it, we're going to see it the way Ezekiel saw it, because those things will be gone again.
Yes, we're going backwards.
We're going to go backward as far as technology is. When Christ comes back, we're going to go back to the way God intended it to be. There won't be nobody walking around their iPhones.
Right.
They won't be walking around in these virtual realities.
Right. Yes.
They'll be going back to the simple life.
Well, Adam and Eve had everything that they needed provided by God. So they didn't need the stuff that we need today.
He didn't say, hey, Adam, here's an iPhone.
He said, commune with me.
Right. Eat from the garden. You're naked.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we're going back to that.
Yeah. That would be different.
Yeah. But I am saying that we're going to go back to the simple ways.
Right.
When you realize that we go back to the simple ways, then what Ezekiel says in chapter 38 and 39 starts making way more sense. All right.
Okay.
So let's get into that.
Okay.
And see what Ezekiel saw. And instead of trying to turn what he saw into our way of thinking, let's look at it according to his way of thinking, because we're going back to that way of thinking.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're in the book of Ezekiel. We're in chapter 38. Okay.
All right.
And I'm not going to read all of chapter 38 and 39. When I make references, I'll pop those references up. Okay.
Okay.
And it says, and the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshach and of Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and I will turn thee back and put hooks in thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth in all thy armies, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. All right?
Yes.
So can you imagine all the quarters of the north, all these people coming out? Now it goes on and tells the origination of Gog, but it also says all kinds of people's coming with you. So it's not just them.
Right.
All right. There's going to be people coming from everywhere. All right. Can you imagine that happening on horses with swords coming up against Israel with a air force that's probably one of the greatest ones there is, tanks and nuclear bombs? Can you imagine that happening today?
Wow. No.
Well, let's think about it. If it is in the future,
All right.
Christ comes back, he's wiped all that stuff out. How would those people travel? They would grab them a horse.
That's right.
They would give them a buckler. They would give them a shield. They would start making swords. They would start making spears. They would start making bows and arrows, right?
Right.
This is what the description that Ezekiel is talking about whenever God comes up. What we're doing is we're saying, oh, we're trying to make metaphors out of it when it's literal. Because we've went back.
Yes.
We went back to riding horses.
Yes.
Because we're not going to, like have any reason to have all these big trucks and cars and vans and all this stuff. We're
Right.
going to be living in communities.
Right.
Be living in our nationals in villages.
Right.
In fact, it talks about later on that they come up against villages, unwalled villages. So is Israel unwalled? Will they ever be unwalled until after the Antichrist's reign of terror is gone? Will they ever take down their walls? Will they ever come to the point that they can just say, okay, you know, I know these guys that's got machine guns, but we'll shut down our walls. And I know they got these missiles and rockets that can shoot at us. We'll just, you know, we don't need no walls.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense.
Right.
It doesn't make sense that this is modern warfare.
Right. Exactly.
And if God wants to tell us they're actually on horses, we can't take his right to tell us that way.
That's true.
So God's telling us that it's going back
Mm-hmm.
the way it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Most of our technology has come in the 1900s and forward.
Right.
Yes. We did get guns and stuff in the late 1800s and stuff like that. But most of it, all this technology, especially what we got, satellites, all that stuff. Because you remember, all the satellites are going to be gone.
Yes.
No iPhones.
Right.
No drones.
The goal is to get back to Eden.
Right.
This is how God meant it to be.
Yeah.
He didn't want us all just like, I feel like the technology today just distracts us from relations with Him.
Right.
You're supposed to be reading your Bible on your phone, but then you get a Facebook notification, and you know what I mean? It just takes all the attention off of God where it should be. Communicate with me, don't text somebody else.
Right.
We're supposed to be talking in relation with each other. And I feel like the world's really taking that away from us.
Well, then the argument might be this. Well, how would somebody try to come up against God? You know, the sun's out. Jesus is lighting the earth. He's saying he's going to make his name known, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's consider something. 1,000 years has passed, right?
Right.
It's not the same people. Most of the people we know today on this earth, most of the inhabitants of the earth during Armageddon will be destroyed. But we'll have teenagers, right?
Right.
We talked about another thing, right?
Right. Right.
We'll have the 144,000 Jews,
Mm-hmm.
and then the earth's going to start repopulating.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So we're going to have new people.
That's right.
And all they're going to know is when they come into this world is this light and that God's there.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to try to come against God until Satan is released. They're not going to be deceived until Satan released. They don't know what we know.
Right. They don't.
They don't understand what we understand. They didn't see Christ coming in the clouds of glory. They didn't see what the spiritualized people and the angels seen. They're going to be just as ignorant, other than the fact that hopefully somebody teaches them, right?
Right.
Keep trying to apply it to today, and it's not today's world. It's a different world. They're not going to know what we know. Now, hopefully, and I'm saying so, that the Bible will still be around.
Yeah.
But the gospel of the kingdom won't be preached like it is now because the resurrection is over. Won't be able to grab your iPhone up and find anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully it'll be taught, and I believe it will be taught. And I'm not saying it's going away. I'm just saying it's a different world.
Yeah.
Totally different world. These guys are going to be, and they're not going to ever have been dealt with temptation. The tempter's been gone all this time.
He's been tied up.
You say, well, how could they turn on God? How could they not know God? Well, what about the angels?
What about Satan?
Yeah, but what about the angels?
And the third that failed.
The third that failed. They got deceived by Satan,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
He's let loose out of his prison.
Mm-hmm.
So these people are new people. It's not the same wise people. They don't have what we have or know what we know or been through what we've been through.
Right.
So this is a whole different world.
Mm-hmm.
So when he does let come out, well, let's go over and read that passage in Revelation 20, and we'll talk about that a little bit, all right?
Okay.
So now we're in the book of Revelation, and we're in chapter 20, and we're in verse number 7. And it says, and when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth. And then it tells us, GOG and MAGOG, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. and they went up on the breadth of the earth. So they're attacking God, right? And
Okay.
compassed the camp of the saints about and the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. Well, that's the same thing that Ezekiel says. He rains down on them fire and brimstone.
Yes.
So he's mimicking the same thing, right? And then it says, and the devil that deceived them was cast in the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and they shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. After Satan is to his final doom,
Yes.
people would say, well, see right there, it says in Ezekiel that it takes them like 7 months to bury all the people, and it takes 7 years to burn all the weapons.
Right.
All right,
Right.
so let's deal with that.
Okay.
All right. The assumption is that immediately after this battle, we immediately go into the great white throne of judgment, that there's no time passes, right?
Right.
But the Bible didn't say that. That's an assumption. The next part of the verse says, and I saw a great white throne. All right.
Okay.
All right. So in the prophecy that Ezekiel says, it will take them 7 years to burn the weapons. They won't even go into the forest, into the trees and cut trees, because they've got the wood from the weapons, from the bows and the arrows and the spears, right?
Yes.
Well, if that's metaphoric for a missile, you're not going to be able to burn that. If that's metaphoric for a machine gun, you're not going to be able to burn that.
That's so
We're
true.
getting plumb off here,
Yes.
But if it is during this time, which it is, then yeah, they'll be primitive weapons, and you'll be able to burn them because they'll be made out of trees, and bows and arrows will be the old timey way,
Right. Yeah.
and you'll be able to burn those weapons.
Yeah.
You'll be able to burn a tank. You'll be able to burn an airplane. To keep yourself warm.
Right. Right.
I'm not going to go out and cut the wood today because I got this F-16 over here I
Yeah.
need to burn. I mean, that's not going to work. Or this tank I need to melt down. It doesn't work. So what we do is we come up with our great wisdom and say, oh, this is just being metaphoric for all these things, but it's not. And I think that's why God wrote it the way he wrote, so we would understand that it's not metaphoric, because they will literally be using all those weapons of war for kindling a fire to heat their houses and stuff.
Yes. Yes.
So it's real apparent to me that Gog and Magog is not prior to Christ's coming, that it is as Revelation 20 says it is. It's after Satan is released and let go. A lot of people's made books and made money out of, telling this great story. And it's a great story, but the problem is there's a lot of problems with it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of problems if you go to interpret it this way, when God's being literal and telling us what's going on. And we do that a lot. Just take God for what he says, the way he says it,
Right.
the way he sees it. Because if not, his testimony's wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
You say, well, he says about these animals, but he always tells you of what's going on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Based on what's being said. Oh, we're likening Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom to a lion with eagle's wings. Well, go look at Nebuchadnezzar's walls. What did he have? He had lions on them. He had some kind of a lizard with wings on it. I mean, you can see where he's getting the metaphors from.
That they're true.
That they're, yeah, they're pointing to something else that's literal.
That's literal.
When he says bow and arrow, why can't it be a bow and arrow?
I know.
Because it don't fit in my matrix. Well, maybe your matrix is wrong. Maybe your understanding is wrong. Some people would say to you, well, maybe yours is wrong. Well, mine makes a lot more sense than me going out there and burning a tank to keep my house warm.
Right.
It just don't.
And the fact that the Lord was kind of like showing you how this is going to play out.
Yeah, he was leading me through this. I didn't get the normal download of the shocking revelation. Just as I studied it,
You asked questions.
well, it's all in the understanding of what the day of the Lord is.
And he told you that if you understand this, you'll understand everything.
Yes.
And so when you understood it, then all the pieces, all the rapture pieces, all this, like it all
God and Magog all comes together. when you understand it from the light of the day of the Lord, that it's the millennial reign and that we're going back like it was Eden, which is what Acts 3:20-21 says, that Jesus cannot leave the heavens until he's ready to restore all things. Well, he's going to restore it to what he meant for it to be, and that wasn't high-rise apartments and cars and all that stuff. He allows us to have that stuff. That wasn't his original plan.
And you can't thwart it. You've got to have.
We're not going to be polluting our land with factories and gas motors and all that stuff during that time. There'll be no need of it, especially for us, because we'll be in glorified bodies.
Right.
We'll be able to take thought. We'll be able to go where we want to. It's going to be awesome.
I know. Oh my goodness.
So yeah, Gog and Magog happens during the day of the Lord toward the end.
When Satan is loose.
Yeah, and he actually makes a comment, and I'll try to pull that up. It says, in that day. It's actually telling us it's within that day. We don't have time for all that now because it takes them 7 years of burning stuff, and heck, we ain't got much more than 7 years left before Jesus comes back.
The timer has started. It's 2025, and we are waiting for the spring something big to happen. And then we know there's not that much time left.
Oh yeah, there's one other thing that we need to talk about.
Okay.
All right. So in the Ezekiel prophecy, chapter 38-39, it says the reason that Gog and Magog come up against Israel is to take a spoil, right?
Okay.
So what was the first thing that Satan did?
Took a third of the heavens?
Started stealing.
Stealing.
Didn't he?
Still kill, destroy is his agenda.
Still kill, destroy.
Such the agenda.
And that's what's going to happen with Gog and Magog. Going to have them steal. They're going to get killed and destroyed. Yeah, it keeps going back to the same.
He's never changed his tactics.
Never changed his tactic because his heart's not changed.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's the whole reason they even come up. And that's the heart of Satan, to steal, kill, and destroy.
We want to see you in heaven.
It's a simple prayer. Just say, Lord, please come into my heart. Forgive me for my sins. Wash me in your blood. And you will live with him forever.
If you are enjoying the content and would like to support our ministry, you can do so through Venmo or PayPal. Our handle is @CardingTruth, or use our QR code. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. It really is true. If you understand the day of the Lord, it all starts to make sense. I'm going to link some of those videos that we did about the day of the Lord so you all can click on those links and watch those episodes. We want to thank our subscribers so much. We appreciate you. And if you haven't subscribed with us, we would love if you would like, subscribe, and click that bell for more notifications. We love to hear from you. Drop us a comment down below. We read those, we try to get back to those, and they are such a blessing. We love being able to communicate with you all. And as always, until next time, from Carding Truth, be blessed.